Competitors, you may begin when you're ready.
Our pasts are often what define us, but frankly, the future is more important. GoPro has been a success story pretty much the whole way. Coming from simply building your own camera to taking it to something that you have marketed to consumers who wear it to film anything from extreme sports to a day at the beach with their kids. So how can you take the momentum of your past and move it into a successful future of more than just a company that builds cameras? So my name's Julian, these are my colleagues Paul and Victoria, and we're delighted to be members of the GoPro team and to help shape its future. In this industry, it's so important to not be stagnant. It's the innovation and adaptation to our surroundings that will shape our future. And in the electronics industry, these surroundings are changing all of the time. So ultimately, we've come here to address two questions today. Firstly, which media assets and strategies moving forward should GoPro go after? You've addressed four possibilities. Frankly, we don't think that all four of them are the best routes to take, not only for value creation in your business, but for the strategic direction of your company. Issue two is, once we've defined what media strategy we would like to take going forward, what peer group should we use to define our successes and to look to for evaluation? So in order to answer these questions, we're first going to take a look at the situation that we're in right now. First, from a company overview perspective, and then we're going to take a look at the industry, the trends that are occurring, as well as the customers that we are targeting. These will really drive what decisions we should make as a company going forward, because it's the view of our company is more important in defining our future and our success than necessarily going down every route available. So then we're going to look at the alternatives at hand, ultimately looking at both a qualitative standpoint of each alternative and then diving deeper into a financial analysis of the alternatives that we deem to be most suitable for the company. Ultimately, we'll recommend that you develop your advertising and your licensing business, as we see that they add the most value, as well as align closest with the values of your business. And as far as an implementation goes, we'll construct that peer group for you. We'll look at what it's actually going to take to develop these media assets, and we're also going to talk about global expansion. You've been growing very quickly, but we still see that a lot of your sales are in one geographic location, and you shouldn't just turn your eyes away from growing as diverse as possible. You should turn your eyes to growing your sales that have driven you to be as successful as you are today.
So before we dive into situational analysis, I'm going to walk you through a quick overview of your company and points that we saw were very strong as we stand today. Well, you're a camera and accessories retailer, and as you can see, one of the best companies in the camera market, especially in the United States right now. In the US and Canada, as a percentage of your sales, you're seeing 57%, and that's a significant number just specifically within that market. Within Europe, Middle East, and Africa, you have 32% and 11% in the Asian Pacific. And this major diversification in the growth within this industry is enabled by the engaging content that's provided by your company. Because you have the ability to allow your customers to take their videos that they've created and put them online in a very easy way that they're able to spread them through social media, you have the marketing that is inherent in your business and is able to allow it to grow. And that is why, as a company right now, you're seeing industry-leading growth. So to dive into the company analysis, from an internal perspective, you're seeing revenue strengths right now. Firstly, that lean and successful marketing that I discussed, you as a company are able to keep your marketing margins low. Sales and marketing margins are only 15% right now of revenues, and they're seeing a steady decline. We're expecting a decline in the future. And this is because of the ability for your customers to take the byproducts of their adventures and put them online and share their experience and their passion. And that is that marketing strategy that is used and implemented. that creates the ability for your project to be a market leader, the product to be a market leader, sorry. It is state-of-the-art in the industry and it's one of the best cameras around. And it has the ease of usability that everybody can access and is easy for individuals to really buy into and use in their everyday lives. There are some weaknesses though, which we're here to talk to you about today. Firstly is that lack of diversification of revenue streams, since your revenue streams are only targeted towards sales of your product right now. And secondly, the company has not monetized the growing body of content. So you do have that huge body of content online with the videos that are being published by your customers, but we haven't capitalized on that and been able to really grow that area as much as possible. So we're here to talk to you about these weaknesses today and have an implementation plan to grow with this. Some opportunities that we've identified are the global prospects and the ability, especially within the Asian markets, with the growing GDP and the growing population within that country. You have individuals with higher disposable income that will want to invest in their adventures and their innovation and the ability to connect with people through these adventures that they're having and post them on social media. So with this global prospect, we also see a media asset development opportunity where you can take the platforms that you've already implemented and really allow them to grow and thrive, and your customers to want to engage in them even more and more. Some threats, however, I see are that the new entrance into market and competition is a potential for you to see in the future, and that is why we think that creating a really strong base as quickly as possible is something that will allow this threat of new entrance to be decreased. As well, a quickly changing industry, it requires that you be constantly innovative, constantly looking for new opportunities, and constantly targeting those the ability to grow as quickly as possible. So to discuss a brief industry analysis, there is a shared culture within the media industry right now. That shared culture is based on the ability for people to want to share their passion, share their experiences, and post everything that they see online, to capture those moments and have them cherished with their friends. And these platforms, however, are quickly evolving. So you see a change from individuals being really into Facebook one year, then really into a different media stream another year. And that quickly evolving platform is something that has to be adapted to by GoPro. And thirdly, within the media industry, there is that global reach. The global reach that someone can say something here and it'll reach all the way to an Asian industry, for example. So this industry is ever-changing and evolving, so we need to look at that as well.
Thanks, Victoria. So now knowing what your company is, what it has done, what it can do, we now have to look at the main alternatives so that you can maximize the value of your business. And you've outlined 4 main alternatives to develop the media side of your business. These being software and studio, distribution, advertising, and licensing. Now, we've established a set of criteria in order for us to determine which of these alternatives are best for you. So we have diversification. You want to diversify your revenue streams. And this is what the media asset line of your business is going to enable you to do. So we're going to look at which of these alternatives will best diversify your revenue streams. We're also going to look at growth in user base. You've identified to us that expanding your user base, making sure that everyone could use GoPro and share their human experience with everyone available is a main value proposition for your business. So we want to make sure that the alternative that you choose enables you to implement that. We also want to make sure that it fits into industry trends. As Victoria mentioned, the media industry is ever changing, it's ever growing, so we have to make sure that we stay on top of things. And then finally, value creation. Ultimately, we've conducted a financial analysis to quantify the value that these alternatives will bring to you. Now, to start, we developed a set of qualitative criteria, and these are the first 3 criteria mentioned. And from there, we'll pick the 2 best alternatives, which end up meeting all our qualitative evaluation, and then perform a financial analysis on it. And looking at our slide here, we look at the qualitative evaluation, and we see that advertising and licensing meet our 3 main requirements for you. being diversification, growth, and remaining in industry trends. Now, we then performed a financial analysis on the two alternatives that we deemed to be a best fit for your company, GoPro, and these being licensing and advertising. Now, we had the projections, these are the projections or the assumptions in our model. We performed a DCF analysis on your company. And we assumed that a growth of 2% for the first 5 years. Expenses remain proportionate to revenue growth. And then we also, our projections were based on historical averages. Now, to determine the WACC for your company, GoPro currently has no debt in their capital structure. So as a result, the WACC is simply the cost of equity. And the cost of equity was calculated using the capital asset pricing model. So we essentially assumed a risk-free rate of 2%. We then used an equity risk premium of 5.75%. Generally, equity risk premiums range in the range of 5 to 6%. We feel that 5.75% reflects current market conditions. We then used a beta of 0.66. Given that your beta is less than 1, this simply indicates that your business has less systematic risk relative to the market. And then finally, when we implemented these inputs, we came up with a WACC of 5.8%. And this WACC was used to discount the cash flows that we projected for your business. Finally, with the terminal growth, we projected a terminal growth rate of 3.5% for your company. And we project, given the industry in which you do your business, that the terminal growth rate is slightly higher than long-term GDP, but because of the fast-growing industry you're in and the business that you're in, we think this is a reasonable assumption. And then when we did this, we came up with a company valuation of $10.95 billion, and this was our base case. Now, we looked at, given that your intrinsic valuation of your company with the projections that we used of $10.95 billion, we then looked at the value added, given that each of these alternatives are implemented, assuming each of them are implemented. And we performed a sensitivity analysis here, varying the revenue drivers and volume drivers. And ultimately, we came up with a median value of close to $12 billion. So, and you see here, based on the assumptions that we made, all these inputs or all these values here are all above the base case valuation, are all above your current market cap, indicating that pursuing an advertising alternative is going to be value creative for your company. Then, looking at the next slide of licensing, again performed a sensitivity analysis, and again came up with a value that exceeded your intrinsic valuation, as well as exceeded your market cap, further indicating that this is value creating for your company. And this is the main assumption we used here. We assume that we combine the two main alternatives, the alternatives being licensing and advertising. If you were to combine both alternatives, what impact would that have on your firm value? And this is what we came up with, a value slightly over $12 billion, assuming $500 per video and 30,000 units. Now, to our recommendation, on the first part, which media assets should you pursue? We came up with that you should pursue both licensing and advertising options, given that they both create value, and if implemented together, would create even greater value for your company. And then finally, answering your second part here of determining a peer group. What would be an adequate peer group so that you could benchmark your performance looking forward? And we came up with two main sections for your peer group, that being consumer electronics and social networking. And the reason we did that is we view GoPro as somewhat of a luxury electronic good, right? It's something that people want to use that's going to enhance their life. It's not necessarily a necessity, but it's going to enhance the quality of their life. They're going to be able to share their experiences with others, post it online. And for that reason, we thought consumer electronics was a good industry to include, and we included specifically Apple, Garmin, and Logitech. And then we also included a social networking side too, because a big part of your business now is going to be media. And we have to look at the advertising revenues generated from that. So for that reason, we included Facebook and Google as peers for you to analyze. Now, one thing to note here is the PE ratios of these comparable companies are lower, significantly lower than your current PE ratio right now. However, we don't foresee this as a significant problem right now, given that we see that GoPro is in a very different stage of their business. We look at these companies, they're more in a mature stage. We see significant growth opportunities for GoPro, both in their media outlet as well as pursuing international opportunities.
Perfect. So now that we've determined exactly what you need to do in order to maximize the value of your company, we're going to take you through a little bit of how to do it. Ultimately, we've broken it down into 3 segments. First, how you're going to go about accomplishing your advertising goals. Secondly, how you're going to go about building your licensing platform. And lastly, we're going to talk about global growth prospects. Paul mentioned that in our projections of your company's value, that you would continue to grow at a rate of 20% over the next 5 years. Now, in order to do that, while you are reaching a more mature stage in the American market, you need to go global. You need to spread your product as well as the user experience that it creates over a global market. Victoria mentioned that there are many opportunities for this in Asia, as well as other parts of the world where there's that human experience that people are now beginning to enjoy more luxury goods like GoPro, as well as other electronic products. So we'll take you through what that exactly is going to entail. But firstly, advertising. So the basis of advertising revenue is going to be coming through YouTube. So the first thing that you need to do on Monday morning is begin establishing contact with YouTube, as well as continue to build the relationship that you already have with them. And by building this relationship, you'll be able to gain a little equity for negotiations. Now, we performed a sensitivity analysis, and a lot of our value assumptions are based off of a median range. However, you did provide quite a range of possible scenarios of both pricing and volume. So we believe that if you build a relationship that you can negotiate on, you'll be able to gain mid to a high range price and maximize your firm value. In months 1 to 2, you'll need to perform your due diligence on the contracts that you're going to be making. Obviously, you'll be entering some fairly serious legal contracts with YouTube. So you'll want to put in the effort as well as all the work that you need to do to make sure that you're not getting yourself into something that might destroy value in the future. And you'll want to make sure that you're adapting your current market offering constantly. New sport offerings, new content that viewers want to watch on YouTube so that you can gain that volume that we talked about, so that you have the number of views that will drive the value of your company. And lastly, in the 3 to 6 month range, we want you to finalize and sign these agreements with YouTube. As far as licensing, you have begun to build a database of content that you could sell to businesses, to anyone who wants to use it for your marketing. So in order to go about doing this, you need to begin to compile an outward-looking interface that you can actually market this content to your users. In months 1 to 2, you'll want to identify industries as well as companies that may want to purchase this content from you. More importantly, in the longer run, you'll want to approach the large companies that you have identified in this phase, because you can make a lot more money off of those worldwide deals that will pay $5,000 per video than selling a lot of $50 videos per se. So lastly, we talked about going global. So in the longer term, 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, we want you to shift your sales focus more globally. Right now, a large amount of your revenue comes in through North America, and so in order to do this, we think that you should seek further sponsorship of athletes on the international market, and as well as locate global social media so you can continue your media asset marketing on a global scale. Now, we have identified a couple of risks with our plan, and the first being developing media assets takes longer than expected. We currently assume that you'll be gaining revenue from these starting in 2016. Now, in the case that you aren't able to capture revenue in 2016, we believe that you should shift your focus shorter term to focusing on that global sales growth. And this decreased revenue per view through YouTube, we believe this won't be too much of a risk through your agreements, but if your advertising does fall below the low point that you have brought to us, we believe that you should pursue additional media channels. So in conclusion, we believe that you should develop media assets as well as develop the licensing. We'll open the floor for any questions at this time.
That concludes the presentation and question and answer period.
I noticed that the price earnings multiples for the media companies, social networking companies, were a lot higher than for the consumer electronics. Why is that?
Yeah, I would say that for social media websites have higher price to earnings ratios than consumer electronics because the market foresees greater growth opportunities in these areas. And that's why GoPro, for instance, is pursuing this market, a media asset market, to take advantage of this growth.
You talked a lot about obviously the media element, but what about the R&D in the actual product? Like, do you think that's a key in the next few years for growth?
Well, your product right now is very strong in the industry. You have Emmy award-winning screen production. So we do think that you do have the ability to research and develop with the current budget you have allocated towards that. And we think that it would be more worthwhile for you to capitalize on the growth opportunities in sales and industrial and in international marketing.
Do you consider acquiring any companies as part of your long-term strategy?
Well, I mean, frankly, we think that you have a very good base where you are. As you mentioned with research and development, that's a good place to put money. You are already began to develop your database for your content. So we believe that you should first focus on capitalizing on the growth into the asset or the media asset line before you think about acquiring companies in the future. Obviously, there are likely creative acquisitions that you can make in the future, but right now, based on the problem that we have that we've identified, that wasn't the main focus of our analysis.
What do you believe your best defense is for competition entering these markets?
Into the or the media asset market?
Well, the combination.
The combination of the two? Well, I think that right now you have a very strong competitive advantage in your electronics and product segment. So that's not as much of a worry to us as in the media asset line, because there's so much growth, like Paul mentioned earlier, there's going to be a lot of people trying to capitalize on that. Now, the best defense is an early start. So by planting your foothold early and building an easy user interface and using the size as well as the strengths that you have from your camera business, you'll be able to shed off any competition coming in by being that first mover.
How do you think how the users would feel when they could pretty much watch some videos for free and then it changes into more of a commercial?
Well, with the streams that we're using, such as YouTube, that is something that's inherent in their strategy right now. So we think that although individuals aren't per se used to this, the YouTube interface has already kind of allowed them to be comfortable with the stream and still use the network regardless of it. So we think that it is something that consumers see as necessary for businesses to continue to grow and continue providing the services that they can.
What do you see as the key risk to your long-term success?
Ultimately, the key risk to your long-term success is going to be keeping up with the industry trends. And no matter how much you innovate, no matter how much you adapt to the industry, things can always go wrong. Look at BlackBerry, for instance. At one point, they were at the top of their game, and then something changed, and they weren't. So ultimately, the biggest risk is making sure that you're keeping up with industry trends and being that first mover, continuously adapting your product, and continuously seeking out how you can better the user experience with your product so that they're always going to that and not to a competitor.